It is Sunday for me. It's actually Mother's Day, but I'm getting a quick workout in before I go out to dinner. That won't be filmed at all for once, which is a good thing. I wanted to have this day not be about content for once and just be about, the people around me. And that's not why I'm making this video. A lot of the content that we've been doing these yap sessions about, we're on a bike yap right now, in case you can't tell. So, disclaimer, I do apologize if I breathe hard, because I'm not just casually strolling on this bike. I'm actually pedaling and keeping my heart rate at like 120. So anyway, a lot of the content that we've been doing has been about things that, just my thoughts on topics that are generally seen as negative. And I'm not saying that I am shouldering the blame on anybody else, but I think in this day and age, a lot of the news that we get on the internet, a lot of the things that we get on the internet, generally speaking, trend to talk more about things that are deemed either controversial or more negative things, because I guess that's what people tend to want to watch more. And I'm just as guilty as anybody else, because when I'm looking for, when I see things that I say, okay, that's what I want to talk about, that is a lot of times negative stuff tends to be what floods my timeline. That could be algorithm based, definitely could be a part of the blame. I don't think I'm the only thing to blame, but I'm definitely a part of the problem. And today I kind of wanted to talk about something that is a little more of a positive thing, that I think things need to focus on things like this a little bit more, but it all depends on what the audience is. But anyway, let me just tell you a story about what happened, and it'll make sense about halfway through. So, an older woman was on a plane, and she sat down next to a younger gentleman who, she says, this is all coming from a tweet, but she says he was extremely courteous. Before she sat down, he, out of nowhere, offered to put her stuff in the overhead bin, was talking to her about her day, was just this really, really nice person. I'll put it up on the screen, but I want to read this because I don't want to take anything and leave it out. So it says, I had the most wonderful flight home from Denver. I met the nicest young man who sat next to me. He offered to put my bag in the overhead compartment and help me with my tray. He was always polite, saying yes, ma'am, or no, ma'am. Anyone would be proud to have him as a grandson or son. Very polite. This is where the story is going to start to make a little more sense. Like she said, she's on a plane from Denver, and she notices that people keep coming up to this young man, saying, congratulations, they're excited for him, etc. And she has no idea who this guy is. So finally, she turns to him and she goes, are you somebody important? And he's like, I guess I just got drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm on my way to minicamp. Turns out that this is actually Travis Hunter, the second overall pick in the draft this year. He is a Heisman Trophy winner, consensus All-American, one of the best players in college football last year. Even people who don't necessarily think he deserved to win the Heisman, opinions are fine. I think you would at least say he's without a doubt one of the best players in college football last year and deserved to be a top 5 draft pick. So we don't really talk about the nice things that athletes do. We don't really talk about the polite athletes, the people who are just out there being regular people. We tend to talk more about the guy who would have went on the plane and made a scene, which there always will be people who do stuff like that, but we never really focus on some of these people are actually good people. And off the field, I've watched a lot of things on the University of Colorado, a lot of different YouTube episodes and, content that they make. And Travis Hunter always came off as that type of person, just really polite, a down-to-earth person. And he just seems to stay in his own lane. For everything I've heard about him is he's not out partying or doing any of the stuff that, and to me, most college kids do anyway, which I wouldn't fault him for, but he's not even doing that. And it's unfortunate that in his case, the thing that he was known for off the field, on the field notwithstanding, but off the field, was he had a situation with his current fiance, which people were kind of going into her past and saying that she wasn't being faithful to him, etc. And he became sort of a meme at certain points where people were laughing at him, saying that, he's not smart and, she's out to get his money, etc. And while that's neither here nor there, people are entitled to their opinions. It's unfortunate that was like the only thing that people talked about for a long time with him off the field. But it was never talked about how polite and nice of a person he was off the field. And you can go and scour Colorado verse their space, and you would hear a lot of similar stories to that, how he was around town with people and how he behaved off the field. We all know how good he was on the field, but how good of a person he was off the field. The other thing that people don't talk about with him, and I think there's this cliche that athletes, physically gifted, most of them aren't smart. What people may not know about Travis Hunter, and I'm going to read these two because I don't want to leave anything out here. But not only was he a football All-American, but he was also a 2-time academic All-American in 2023 and 2024. He had a 3.79 GPA. He majored in anthropology, which I didn't major in anthropology. I majored in exercise physiology. So I don't really know what that major entails. I know people say, oh, you take an easy major. Anthropology doesn't really sound like an easy major, but I digress. First team academic All-American both to the 2023 and 2024. Academic All-American of the Year in 2024. And he is one of 2 players in the history of Colorado football to have both a first team academic and first team sporting football All-American. Nobody seems to talk about that when it comes to him, and that's unfortunate because everything that I've seen, and I'm rooting for him, I have been for a while, I think he's a really good kid. I think he seems like a really good person, and he seems like somebody who just goes about his business. Yes, he likes to have fun in sense of like he's doing TikTok dances and stuff, but that's the worst thing I've seen, like the thing that people pick out, not worst to me, but the thing that people say about him. That and who he chooses to date are the 2 things that people still try to dissect him over. So it's funny enough that you're seeing him on the plane coming from Denver. He's going to Florida, going to Jacksonville. And what's not being also talked about is the reason he was in Colorado was to receive his degree. He did leave a year early, as far as from a football standpoint. He still had another season of eligibility, and he still graduated. He still has his degree. Even though he left early, a lot of times people talk about athletes leaving college early, but it's not necessarily talked about whether or not they got their degree. And in his case, he was a great student. And he, to me, as crazy as this may sound, now there are other people who should be in this category, but when you talk about student athlete and someone who handles their business on and off the field, he should be someone that people are including in that conversation. Yet, I've rarely heard anything about that. And it's unfortunate because I think that there's a civic responsibility to anybody, myself included, but anybody that has any sort of platform, whether that's a sporting platform or anything, if you're going to talk about topics, and I want to be better at this personally, it made me kind of like look at myself and say, look, I'm not saying I'm not going to not talk about negative topics in the sense of what people do and what my thoughts are on them, even though I don't agree with the things that they do. The angle I've always tried to take was, if I see something negative, that I will talk about how maybe people want to look from a different perspective. It's not because I'm just trying to bring drama. It's more or less to say, maybe we could look at this a different way. But I want to highlight more positive stuff too, because it is important. There's young people in this country, younger people in this country, and even people in my age bracket and above, that we need to highlight positive things so that we can see things that we might necessarily aspire for. Now, to play devil's advocate, because I know some people are going to say things like this, not because I necessarily agree or disagree. I do agree with this part. We don't really know somebody. So I'm not trying to be a negative person and go, oh, we don't know what he's really like. We only see what we see of him, because we've had the rug pulled out on us from a lot. And I do think that has made us skeptical to put anybody up on this thing where they're like, that's a good person, because we don't really know them. But just strictly from the outside lens looking in, I still think even if we don't know someone personally, we can say, if you have a son or daughter or someone who aspires to do something, that's still a good example of you can be great at something and still take care of business on the other end. There's so many athletes in the past. I played with some too that were on both sides of that coin. That people that were really good football players and really good students. I played with people who were really good football players and not great students. And then I played with people who were not great football players and great students. But that's really hard to juggle those things. And I still want to give him his props for it. And I understand that, people might have people might have helped him. And if that was the case, then every athlete would have a 4.0. He still had to apply himself to some capacity. And as a former athlete, I can tell you, it's very hard. Not hard. It's very demanding to put your all into being the best athlete you can be, because there's a lot of hours that go into that people don't see. You only really see the person on the field, but you don't see all those hours in the weight room, in the film room, in the training table, at study table. Your day as an athlete is so long. Typical day in the off season would start at 6 a.m. for workouts. You'd be in class till 3 p.m. and then you'd have to come back for whatever other activities you had for football. It could have been something like study table. It could have been something like, training. Some people had to get rehab on injuries. Some people had to meet with coaches, but that part wasn't. But you still had a demand after your classes were done, which was usually like 3 p.m. So you take all the demands of being a college student in general, and then you compound that with something else that's another job. It's difficult. It's demanding. You can do it, but you really have to learn how to manage your time, to apply yourself. It's something that it taught me a lot, because that still till this day, I'm a person that I try to be as efficient as possible, because I know you're going to get so many hours in a day. And I think being an athlete, it was instilled in me. I had a former teammate, one of my closest friends in the team, he became an investment banker. And after he finished school, we would still keep in touch. Me and a couple of my friends, we still had a group chat, and we would talk about life after football, what it was like, what we had to do to adjust to not putting a helmet on anymore. And he became an investment banker through like grunt work. I respect that, because it's not easy to do. He had to build a client list, and it was a lot of cold calling. It was a lot of walking around, business to business, door to door. So I'm not saying home addresses, but going to businesses door to door, introducing themselves, getting them to invest money in somebody who they don't even know. And I remember what he said to me back then, and I was just like, you're not wrong. So he said a lot of the other people that were in that group of people that they first brought in out of school, they would kind of drop out and not do the work. And he was like, bro, I played football in college. Like, you had to get up in 2 days. You think it's hard to get up and walk around and do all this other stuff? Like, you think it's hard for my boss when he's telling me that this isn't good enough? Like, I played for Coach Blank. That was way harder than any of this stuff. And I kind of laughed, because I was like, I kind of feel the same way when it comes to that. I know some people have this down look towards athletes. Like, they think that it's just this mindless. And I do understand that part of it to a certain extent. I understand the negative parts. Positively speaking, though, I can tell you this. Being an athlete in my past taught me so much. Taught me teamwork, for sure. How to work with others to get a job done. Because sometimes you're not going to get along with your teammates, but you still had a common goal you were working towards. So it really teaches you how to be a team player. Whether you are a person who's on the team or a leader, a captain, you have to have the ability to work with others. It definitely teaches you how to take constructive criticism, because there are times that you get told things about your coach that I wouldn't tell my kids some of this stuff. And you have to develop thick skin because of it. If you play at bigger schools or even a bigger high school, you still have to deal with outside noise of fans and community message boards and, booing. And I remember we played at Missouri, and I got beer, not me, everybody got beer thrown at us. Or we played at a school called Youngstown State, which is a school in Ohio. They had a commemorative football giveaway night. We got pelted with footballs all night. Now, we couldn't turn around, because if we were to go up in the stands and we were to do, now I'm not condoning the football thing, because that's wild, but if we were to do that, we'd have got kicked out of the game. We'd have got suspended. And you have to just learn how to just duck. But you get the idea. The other thing that it teaches you a lot is structure, how to manage your time, because you got to get a lot done in a short amount of time. You might have a class on one side of campus, get your workout in, and then go back to class. And you can't be messing around in the weight room. You got to be efficient with your time, efficient with your studies, or it will overwhelm you. And it does teach you those types of things. When I started out in the workforce, it was surprising how many employers wanted former athletes because of that. Because you do have to have that ability to manage and get things done and complete tasks efficiently. So there are things that do help. I just wanted to talk about that because I don't think that we shine a light on the positive starts or positive aspects of things as much as we do the negative thing. I'm also a part of that problem, but I also want to be a part of the solution. So I'm going to try to find some good things in here as well, just examples of good and not just examples of not good. I don't want to say bad, not good to react to. But I'm at 20 minutes. I got another 40 minutes today. And, then I got to go out to dinner and stuff like that. But this is another example. I really didn't have to be here today. I didn't intend to film anything, but I know I wouldn't have gone and I would have known. So that's why I'm here. And that's it. I appreciate y'all.